What is going on, fantasy owners? Another week in the books. Week 2 now complete, and we're headed into week number 3. Chris Pearson here once again, bringing you down the ride on the Fantasy Football Stock Report. So glad you guys are checking this video out. Again, I thank you all for all your support and views. Really appreciate it. I know you're excited about the season, as much am I. Hopefully your team is off to a 2-0 start. Again, not to toot my own horn, but mine is. In fact, in my league, I'm the highest scoring team in my league so far this year. So I told you guys at the start in my preview video after my draft, I was really excited about my roster, and it is definitely coming together. So hopefully you guys are 2-0 too. But this past week we saw kind of we heard a big bzzz around the NFL. It's like bzzz, and it's flying around all these different stadiums and teams, and some people got stung really bad. Oh, that's right, the injury bug. The injury bug hit a lot of teams hard this week. Guys that you normally can rely on to start every single week, you might not have them this week. Guys like Ray Rice, guys like Steven Jackson, who's already been ruled out. Guys like, Andre Johnson got a concussion. Eddie Lacy has a concussion. Larry Fitzgerald is hurt. Maurice Jones-Drew is hurt. So a lot of guys that you might not have available for this week, but don't fear, we're going to talk about a lot of guys who stepped up in their place and who are definitely worth looks out there on the waiver wire this week for guys you can step up. So guys, again, who's shown this week and who didn't, let's jump right in and talk about it. Of course, as we always do, we break it down game by game to see what happened. Starting with the Thursday night game. And the Thursday night game this week, we expected it to be kind of an ugly game because of the fact that, it was New England playing the Jets. And yeah, we knew New England's receiving core was already decimated because the fact that Danny Amendola was out due to that groin injury, which, by the way, if you are an Amendola owner like myself, there is some good news. Amendola is not going to need sports hernia surgery, so that means instead of missing a long period of time, like 2 to 6 weeks, he's only going to miss a couple weeks. So that's huge. He will be back, though, but for now, as long as he's still out, keep him on your bench. Don't get rid of him yet. He will be back. But then the game just turned out to be a really, really sloppy one on both sides of the ball. Tom Brady couldn't connect with his receivers, so tough sledding there. But New England did pull out a 13-10 win. The top star for me was Julian Edelman, and we kind of knew this coming into the game. With Shane Vereen out till week 11, with Amendola out, someone had to at least catch the ball from Tom Brady, and because the young receivers like Aaron Dobson and Kenbrell Tompkins are still kind of feeling things out and they're not bona fide starting options just yet, Edelman should have been in your lineups. He had 13 catches. Now, he only had 78 yards, and he didn't find the end zone, so you wish maybe he would have done a little bit more with that. But, hey, Brady had a rough day. When Tom Brady's yelling at his receivers on the sideline, telling them they're wide open, if you saw that clip, you can only hope it gets better. You really can only hope that it gets better for him. They're in a tough matchup this week against the Buccaneers for the Pats. I think you can look at Edelman maybe as more of a number 2, number 3 option for that game. You wonder if Revis is going to be focused on Edelman, so keep that in mind. Maybe you look at Tompkins as kind of a flex option or a desperate number 3. Dobson, I don't think is still worth starting just yet. Yes, he had the touchdown, but don't fall for that yet. He's not that much involved yet, so just keep Aaron Dobson reserved for now on waivers. Stephen Hill, a couple Jets actually had pretty good games, which is kind of surprising. But Stephen Hill, again, it's kind of like that same theory. You have to, if your offense is bad, you have to throw the ball to somebody. And Geno Smith apparently likes throwing to Stephen Hill. Yes, Antonio Holmes, he might be the biggest name on the Jets roster at receiver, but Hill really started to separate himself a bit from the other guys on the roster. He only had 4 catches. That's bad. But he had 86 yards. That's good. So he's doing a lot with little. So So if you're desperate, with the Jets going up against the Bills next week, maybe you can plug in Hill as a serviceable number 3 guy. This might not get carry over because you never know who's going to get the bulk of the work in that Jets offense, but certainly if this trend continues where Hill gets more targets and gets more involved, he could be a serviceable number 3 for you. And Bilal Powell, the Jets running backs, and I actually had a guy talk about, send me a question last week, and I thank him for that question on Bilal Powell, and you know what? And I said, well, I'm still not fond of the Jets running backs. I just don't prefer either of them. But it looks like Powell now is getting the bulk of the work. He's definitely the Jet running back to own now. If you are in a pinch at running back, and I think you can definitely cut ties with Chris Ivory. Powell had a way better performance. He had 13 carries for 48 yards and a touchdown. Now, granted, Ivory had just as many carries and yards. He had 12 carries for 52 yards. So it looks like this is still a timeshare split. But if I had to pick one I would rather own Bilal Powell because I think he's going to do more with what he's given. I think he's a better running against the tackles guy than Ivory is. Ivory's never been able to handle a starting running back load. That's the thing. Powell has. So that is why I think separates Powell from Ivory. So with either of these guys, though, I think they're really nothing more than desperate number 3 or flex options against the Bills. Certainly the Bills can be run on. So, D'Angelo Williams just carved the Bills up. So Powell could have a decent week for you, but I think he's the better option to have here than Chris Ivory. The hair pullers. Poor Tom Brady. Tom, what happened, Tom? Well, a lot of things happened with Tom Brady. Receivers who went away, receivers who got injured, a second half downpour, and the poor rookie receivers who apparently don't know their routes, which led to Brady screaming his head off. It's like that. It's like Cinderella. Put it all together, and what do you got? The dibbity doobity crap. Something like that. It was just blah. It was awful. 19 of 39 for 185 yards and a touchdown. 13 fantasy points in a CBS league. Yikes. Now next week the Pats play at home against Tampa, and Tampa, even though they're 0-2, they've kind of been tough on defense this year. So obviously you can't afford to sit Tom Brady, but I wouldn't really expect those elite numbers until his receivers really get on the same page with him, or he gets Danny Amendola back in a few weeks. So again, you're probably not sitting him, but just don't expect those big highlight reel numbers until he gets a lot of his receiving core back. Or unless he can find a way to better communicate with them. That's really all I have to say about that. Stevan Ridley, we have to say he's the de facto starter while Vereen's out, but doesn't guarantee he'll do anything with that role. 16 carries, 40 yards. That is not what we expected from Stevan Ridley taking this starter role while Vereen's gone. We expect him to break out. And now you got Tampa Bay's defense coming to town next week. Now he's not going to get a whole lot better for Stevan Ridley. Again, with the limited options out there, you probably can't afford to sit Stevan Ridley, but I can't really rate him as nothing more than a number 2, number 3 option because of the tough matchup. And again, I mentioned it, the Patriots wideouts, Amendola out, Edelman the major beneficiary, but no one else did with themselves any favors this week. Dobson did have a touchdown, I mentioned, but he also dropped a lot of passes after that. That was really only the touchdown was really only Dobson's one bright spot. After that, he was just drop city. He became the Patriots version of Greg Little. He just completely started dropping passes, ran several incorrect routes. Tompkins had a touchdown taken off the board, unfortunately. Didn't do much else besides that. Really, until these young guys really develop a stronger rapport with Tom Brady, it might be time to jump ship on them. In my league, I've already decided to cut Kenbrell Tompkins for Brian Hartline. So I don't think they're worth holding on to. You can continue to use Edelman as a number 3 as long as Danny Amendola is out. You can stash Amendola, but for now, the 2 young guys, I wouldn't have them on any roster at the moment until they can really prove themselves. Or you might be able, if you have the bench room, maybe you keep one of them on your bench. Maybe you keep Tompkins on your bench just to see if he breaks out at some point. But with my league, my competitive league, I just can't afford to do that. So I decided to drop him. it's your call. But for now, they're off the fantasy radar, that being Dobson and Tompkins. Moving on to Atlanta and St. Louis. Boy, what a game this was. St. Louis gave this clearly. I love this new St. Louis offense. They are really giving themselves a new identity. They have a lot of talent around them there in St. Louis with Sam Bradford, Daryl Richardson now running back, the wide receiving core, the young guys like Tavon Austin, Austin Pettis. I mean, these guys. I mean, and you know how good Atlanta is. But St. Louis gave Atlanta all they could handle. The Falcons did pull it out 31-24. And now a star kind of going forward for future weeks for the Falcons is Jason Snelling. We saw, as I mentioned in the open, we saw a lot of running backs succumb to injuries this week. Steven Jackson, no exception. And really, Snelling has kind of been waiting for his opportunity to take a feature role. He's been on Atlanta's roster for, I think, at least a couple years. So he ended up with 11 fantasy points. He got 60 yards total in rushing and receiving and a score. Now, when I mentioned this, Jackson's status still up in the air, but now I can say that Steven Jackson has been ruled out. He will not play this week. So obviously, if you're a Jackson owner or if you're someone who needs help at running back this week, you might want to, if he's still out there in waivers, you might want to go take a shot on Jason Snelling. I think he's maybe a decent number 3 or maybe even a flex option against Miami. And, Miami just played the Colts. They didn't exactly have a great time stopping Ahmad Bradshaw. So maybe you look at Snelling as a number 3. Maybe Jacquizz Rodgers is also worth a look as a flex. I think Snelling's still going to get the bulk of the work than Rodgers, but maybe you look at Jacquizz Rodgers as a flex option as well. I mentioned these two guys, the Flying Austins now, as I'm going to call them. The Flying Austins, hello! I love Keith Olbermann's new show, by the way. Had to do that. Tavon Austin and Austin Pettis. You know how the Pacers have the G2 zone, like with Paul George and George Hill? Well, the Rams should do that for their seating, for their something, like the Austin zone or something like that. I don't know. But these two guys had excellent days for this new-look Rams offense. Tavon had 6 catches for 47 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Pettis had 8 catches for 78 yards and a score. Now, there are a lot of weapons in St. Louis, and Daryl Richardson catches passes out of the backfield, and there's also Chris Givens, who had 5 catches for 105. So it's tough to tell who's going to get the bulk of the work each week, but it's clear that these guys really started to separate themselves from the pack. Pettis gets a lot more targets, so I really like him maybe as a number 3 starter against the Cowboys. If he's up there on your wire and you need help at wide receiver, Austin Pettis is not a bad guy to take a flyer on. Austin and Givens, maybe more of a number 3 or flex option guys, but I think all these guys are going to have big years in St. Louis this year. And the other star this week in this game, obviously the connection between Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. I mean, these two are studs already, but they showed it even more against the Rams. And if you had both of these guys on your team like I do, you were given major returns for it. They combined for 50 fantasy points in CBS standard leagues. Ryan had 26, I think, and Jones had 24, or the other way around. But still, impressive work for both these guys. And the Falcons take on Miami next week. Miami just got torched. Miami's a good team, but they just got torched by T.Y. Hilton and the Colts. So I think you can definitely start both these guys with confidence. They're going to have big weeks the rest of the season. So, yes, definitely your Falcons weapons, they're going to be strong. The hair pullers, the guys that didn't come through, obviously because of the injury, Steven Jackson. We know he's out this week. It's that thigh injury, possibly longer. You want to keep him reserved on your bench until he's given the green light to return. Harry Douglas. Whoops. We thought, with Roddy White's situation still up in the air and Julio, not doing so with that ankle issue, we thought maybe Harry Douglas would be the next guy to step up. Well, instead, Julio Jones went off, and Matty Ice must have forgot that Harry Douglas was even on the Falcons roster because after his big week last week, he only had 4 catches for 43 yards this week. So really, 1 week wonder until Douglas really can become more consistent. I don't think you can look at him as maybe even nothing more than a number 4 option against Miami. And obviously monitor Roddy White's health, see if that plays into it in any way. But clearly, there's no consistency right now for Harry Douglas. And Isaiah Peed, well, so much for the experts saying he was going to break out after his one-game suspension. He did absolutely nothing to even challenge Daryl Richardson for the starting spot at running back. Pete only had 3 touches for 19 total yards. Richardson is the Rams back to own right now. I own him myself. He's a number 2 flex option, that being Richardson. Pete, to me, still not worth owning at this point. Baltimore beating Cleveland 14-6. Again, ugly game, but then again, this is Cleveland. You expect games like this to be kind of ugly. The big story coming out of this game, though, for Cleveland is that Brandon Weeden suffered a thumb injury. He has been already ruled out for this week. He will not play this week. Cleveland is going up against Minnesota this week, and that is the game of the week, ladies and gentlemen. Not W-E-E-K, but W-E-A-K. That is the game of the awful. If you like bad quarterback play, watch Cleveland at Minnesota, because now you have Brian Hoyer, who will be starting at quarterback for Cleveland. Yes, I said Brian Hoyer, the former Spartan, going up against Christian Ponder, the former Seminole. But neither of these guys have established themselves in the NFL. It's going to be an ugly game in Minnesota. But talking about Baltimore-Cleveland, stars for Baltimore, you want to get Bernard Pierce off the waiver wire as well. And for those of you who drafted Pierce as Ray Rice's handcuff, you guys are looking like geniuses right now, because Rice suffered a hip injury against the Browns. We don't know what the severity of that is. Actually, I think they said it was a hip flexor, but we're not 100% sure on that. But status going forward, definitely unknown. In all likelihood, won't play this week. But Pierce is a very suitable replacement. I got to tell you, I watched Bernard Pierce play when he was in college at Temple. I know I say that a lot about guys that I watch in college, but I tell you what, this guy is a speed runner. He has the speed and the tenacity to run between the tackles. He's very good. He can handle the bulk of the work. 19 carries for 57 yards and a score. So in all likelihood, you probably won't find Pierce on the waiver wire, because a lot of people do draft him to be Ray Rice's handcuff. But if he's out there, he's going to be a real popular ad this week. So it looks, and all signs point he's going to start against that Texans defense. I think you can plug in Pierce as a decent number 2, number 3 guy. I really, really like Bernard Pierce this week. How about Marlon Brown? Who? Yeah, you're probably saying who, but you shouldn't be anymore after his performance last week. Marlon Brown has now established himself as the number 2 Ravens wide receiver, because Jacoby Jones is still out with that knee issue, and he's out for at least 4 to 6 weeks. So Brown has clearly cemented himself as a number 2 receiver. And there are many people saying that even when Jacoby Jones returns, Brown could still be starting and be serviceable, because Jones really never established himself as that number 2 wide receiver threat. Marlon Brown has definitely done that and then some. He chalked up 4 catches for 45 yards with a score against Cleveland, so that's 10 fantasy points. That's huge. I started Marlon Brown in my league last week and paid huge dividends for me in my win. So he might even retain the starting position when Jones comes back. You know, the sky really seems to be the limit for Marlon Brown. If he is still out there on your waivers, please take a shot on Marlon Brown. I don't think you'll be disappointed in him. I love this guy's upside. I think he's a strong number 3 for the Houston matchup. Even though the Texans secondary is tough, I still think Brown maybe could come through for a score. Because think about it. Number 2 receivers, who's Houston going to be focusing on? They're focusing on Torrey Smith. They're going to double team Torrey Smith. Who is then going to be open? Marlon Brown. It makes sense. And the other star in this game, obviously, Jordan Cameron. Again, I don't have to remind you, Cameron is a legit number 1 tight end for going forward. 5 catches for 95 yards. Now, obviously, with Weeden being out, with a new quarterback coming in, and Josh Gordon is coming back this week off the suspension, maybe you'll see his targets diminish a little bit, but still, you can't really ignore the production that Cameron has put up. I think he's a solid number 1, number 2 tight end option for the Texans game this week. The guys that let us down, Brandon Weeden. You know, I'm really starting to think that many Browns fans are trying to find a way to push the rewind button on their remote and find a way to, like, channel the Weeden they saw in the preseason. Like, okay, here's our guy from preseason. Pull this out. Hey, stick it in the regular season. Because it really has not channeled over to when the games count. Now, obviously, the thumb injury might be a little bit of a blame for that, but 21 of 33, 227 yards, no touchdowns, only 9 fantasy points. Yes, the matchup was tough, but there's weapons in Cleveland, at least some weapons for Weeden to get involved in. So it's kind of odd that he's not putting up the points that you would expect from him. You know, if you fail to take advantage of your weapons, that's more often than not your fault. So, but again, I reported that Weeden will already be out this week, so he won't play. You're going to bench him this week. But then again, you're not starting Brian Hoyer either. So if you're not playing, you're obviously sitting Wheaton. Keep him on your bench or keep him on waivers. You might want to sit all Browns this week, maybe not Josh Gordon or Jordan Cameron, but you might even, I don't know about Trent Richardson. Another one of those guys that's And I've said the schedule gets better as the season goes on with Trent Richardson, but you are sure not liking Trent Richardson's stats right now. This is not the guy you drafted to be one of your top running backs. Only had 79 total yards against the Ravens, but this was kind of expected because, if we need a reminder, the Ravens' defense is actually pretty good. And now they play Minnesota next week, as I said. Their defense is not exactly outstanding, And with Hoyer at quarterback, they, I think, are going to pound the rock against the Vikings. This is going to be an Adrian Peterson versus Trent Richardson show, okay? This is going to be a battle of the running backs. I think you can look at Richardson definitely as a solid number 2 option. Not really nowhere near elite right now, but certainly a guy you can plug in for this matchup because I think the rock is going to be really pounded in this game because the quarterback play is just so awful. And finally, Dallas Clark. Well, so much for his breakout, too. Had a good week 1, and then finally fell back down to earth. 1 catch for 8 yards. If I mentioned to pick him up, my bad. I thought possibly, with the weapons, Torrey Smith was their only main weapon, but then Marlon Brown started to break out, and I thought he'd be the next guy to step up and break out. Apparently that didn't happen. So apparently you want no Ravens tight ends. Right now, the only Ravens receivers worth starting are Torrey Smith and Marlon Brown. End of story. Buffalo, Carolina. Another great performance for E.J. Manuel and the Bills. They pulled it out. The late touchdown pass to us, I believe it was to Stevie Johnson, won it for Buffalo, 24-23. Huge win. But I don't know if you guys watch Olbermann like I do, the show in the late night on ESPN, but someone from the Bills' Twitter feed, when the extra point was kicked, they said, "Extra point good, overtime, here we go." Oops. No, that means the Bills won their Bills' Twitter feed, so you guys won. You won. You're 1-1. So that was kind of funny. Stars of the game, C.J. Spiller. Apparently he's back. All of his owners, you can breathe a sigh of relief now. It sure looked like, though, that Fred Jackson was taking over in the timeshare, that he got more work last week. But if you decide to stick with C.J. Spiller and you didn't jump the ship, good job. You look like a genius because Spiller had 16 carries for 103 yards, and he beat out Fred Jackson this week. So, if anything, though, this might mean that it could be kind of hard to tell who gets the bulk of the work each week. But on the other hand, this could have again cemented that the job of Spiller's to lose. Spiller's back in our good graces again. He's definitely a must-start against the Jets next week. Now, for those of you Fred Jackson owners, he did have less yardage this week, but he did vulture a touchdown from Spiller, so that kind of stinks for the Spiller owners. I don't know. Maybe you look at Jackson as number 2 or a flex option this week. Maybe he'll get just as involved as Spiller does. But Spiller's definitely a must-start. Jackson may be a sneak in there as a flex option or number 2 guy for you. I mentioned him, Robert Woods. Yes, we know that Stevie Johnson was a studly self. He scored 17 points, and you're starting him. But you might want to really look at Robert Woods as a number 3 receiver going forward for your team. He's now clearly lined up as a number 2 receiver option there in Buffalo. He had 4 catches for 68 yards, plus he had a 2-point conversion, so he had 8 points in standard leagues. Excuse me. Woods is definitely getting his share of looks from E.J. Manuel, which is huge. And he's definitely, we know that Manuel's a quarterback upgrade in Buffalo. I really like Woods as a number 3 with upside going up against that Jets defense. And then obviously the last star is E.J. Manuel. I'm telling you, if you guys need a solid number 2 quarterback as your backup who's going to produce points, look no further than the rookie from Florida State. In my honest opinion, and I know this is going to surprise a lot of people, he has more upside as number 2 than Flacco, who's so inconsistent, Dalton, who's so inconsistent, or even Terrell Pryor, because it's the Raiders. I'm serious. He has playmakers in the backfield in Spiller and Jackson. He has playmakers in the receiving core in C.V. Johnson and Woods. And if you haven't noticed, Buffalo's now competing, folks, with him under center. 27-39 for 296 yards and a touchdown cannot be ignored. If you're in a pinch at quarterback, you can definitely start Manuel against the Jets. Tom Brady didn't have receivers against the Jets. E.J. Manuel has plenty. Hair pullers. Ted Ginn. You know, it doesn't matter where Ted Ginn is at. He's just not a consistent fantasy producer. And please don't fall into the trap, okay? You know, completely ignore his 3 catches for 62 yards and a score for the Panthers. It's not worth it. You're just going to be straining yourself. He should still be left on waivers. The only reliable options in Carolina right now are Steve Smith and Greg Olsen. Don't touch him. Brandon LaFell. Same thing. You know, this is, and what I'm about to say here, this is not toward fantasy owners. This is for all the media who keeps being so sold on Brandon LaFell. I owned Brandon LaFell last year, okay? He stunk. He stunk it up on my bench. In this game, he had 4 catches for 13 yards. He's not breaking out. Give it up already. It's over, okay? It's over for Brandon LaFell. No. You should not be owned. You should not pick him up. Don't do it. And Steve Smith. Well, I mean, I know I'm picking all the Panthers here, but it's simple. Bills players were good. Panther players mostly weren't good. Smith this week, while he should still be owned and started, he only had 5 catches for 52 yards. So, you know, with Cam Newton's legs and the fact that they are distributing the ball around a little too much, it's really hard to tell what he's going to do from week to week. But they play the Giants next week. That Giants secondary just got carved up by Denver. You are still starting Steve Smith as a number 2, number 3 option, and you're starting Greg Olsen at tight end. But no one else. No. All right, enough about the frustrating Panthers. Let's move on. Chicago, Minnesota. What a game this turned out to be, actually. I was quite surprised that Minnesota gave the Bears a game, but surprisingly they did. But the Bears luckily were able to pull it out and win 31-30. And the first star, Jay Cutler. Shocker, right? Hear me out. First off, Jay Cutler must love having Mark Trestman as his coach because this Bears offense 10 times better than what it was. And the offensive line is keeping Cutler off the turf. He's only been sacked once this season. That was last week, but one time. It is amazing what Jay Cutler's numbers can do when he stays upright. 28 of 39 for 290 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 picks, and a passer rating, even though it didn't factor in fantasy, of 97.2. You can only hope the trend continues. And going up against the Steelers defense, who's clearly on the downslope right now, if you play in a league where you start 2 quarterbacks, I think Cutler's a really sneaky number 2 start this week. He's going to have a big week this week, I feel. Someone just got him off of waivers in my league. I think you guys should be one of them too if you're really in a pinch at quarterback or play in a league where you start 2 QBs. He's very serviceable this week. Second star, Greg Jennings. Well, I say it all the time when these teams have bad quarterbacks. Somebody's got to catch the ball in Minnesota, and apparently Jennings is the biggest beneficiary. 5 catches for 84 yards, but again, here's the thing. Christian Ponder hinders that upside. He might find the end zone again against the Browns, so maybe you plug him in as a number 2, number 3 option, maybe on the chance that some balls will be thrown in the air in a game, because I think it's going to be a pound the rock game. Maybe you take that chance, but I really can't go any higher than that, because again, I think it's going to be a running showdown. Third star, Martellus Bennett. Look, we already know how good Brandon Marshall is. I don't need to tell you to start Brandon Marshall, okay? But you need to start this guy, Martellus Bennett, going forward at tight end. He had 9 targets, caught 7 of them, 76 yards with 2 touchdowns. Oh, yeah, including the game-winning touchdown. Jay Cutler loves throwing to this guy as much as he does to Brandon Marshall. Obviously, you're definitely starting Bennett against the Steelers because if you guys didn't notice on Monday night, the Steelers give up pretty big plays to both tight ends in Cincinnati, Jermaine Gresham and Tyler Eifert. So, yeah, you're definitely starting Martellus Bennett against the Steelers. The hair pullers. Gee, I wonder who the first one's going to be. Let's see. This is Minnesota we're talking about. Who's going to be the first hair puller? Oh, I don't know. How about Christian Ponder? It's like that Rod Stewart song or something, or Michael Bolton. Do I have to say the words? Do I have to every week? He's terrible. You know it. I know it. You might get away with him as a 2 against Cleveland because it's Cleveland. Then again, they might run with AP all day like I've said. Never mind. Just don't touch him. Moving on. Alshon Jeffrey. Sell Alshon Jeffrey. I thought that he would be a breakout guy. Everyone was saying, he's going to be the breakout number 2 receiver behind Brandon Marshall. The only breakout he's doing is breaking the hairs on my head seeing his low point totals. I sold him off for Eddie Royal. He's gone, and he should be gone on your rosters as well. This is clearly Brandon Marshall and Matt Forte's offense. If you were hoping for a breakout season, you could safely drop Alshon Jeffrey. It's just not going to happen now. And at this rate, it may not happen ever. He just doesn't get enough targets or touches in this offense. He's just not getting it. We don't know why. Is he not frustrated? I would be. Everyone said, hey, you're going to be that breakout number 2 guy. Oh, I got 4 touches. That doesn't mean anything. And finally, Jerome Simpson. For all of you put in a waiver claim for this guy last week, you're dumb. 2 catches for 49 yards. Remember who the quarterback is. Remember who the offense revolves around. Hint, it's not Jerome Simpson. And the name of his quarterback rhymes with Sistan Squander. End of story. All right, Green Bay 38, Washington 20. The Pack ran through that Redskins defense like they were, like the Steelers defense, like they were butter. I can't believe it's not butter. I can believe it's the Redskins because that's how bad they were. They were really, really, really awful. And even the player comes out this week and says RG3 is not well because he's not his mobile self. Duh! He's wearing a knee brace. He's not going to be in his noble running self. The first star, though, this week is James Starks of the Packers. Well, welcome back, James. We hardly knew thee. Eddie Lacy, he got lit up, got a concussion, was taken out of the game. So Starks was the next guy in line. And boy, oh boy, did he impress with his opportunity. 20 carries, 132 yards with a touchdown, and 36 receiving yards as well. That's 22 fantasy points in a standard league, people. That just can't be ignored. Now, obviously, his fantasy value long-term all hinges on how long Lacy might be out. But depending on the severity of the concussion, they usually rule out a player for a few weeks. And the coach has said today, we actually just read this a few minutes ago before I started recording, that even when Lacy comes back, they are going to split carries between Eddie Lacy and James Starks. So clearly, Starks has earned his place in the Packer backfield. He should be a hot waiver commodity this week. I just got him off the waiver wire myself for my fourth running back because I got Monty Ball the heck off my roster because he has done nothing in Denver. And I really like Starks against the Bengals. Yes, it's a tough matchup, but maybe a number 2 play with some serious upside. He'll still find his way. I really like Starks this week. The Packers wideouts. Boy, oh boy, when you have Aaron Rodgers throwing to you as your quarterback, if you have a Packers wideout on your roster, you usually do pretty well every single week. Randall Cobb, 9 catches for 128 yards and a touchdown. Jordy Nelson, 3 catches for 66 yards and 2 touchdowns. James Jones, after getting shut out last week, had 11 catches for 178 yards. The bottom line is, if you have a Packers wide receiver on your team, you are starting him. That is clear. Unless they get bit by the injury bug, and then, well, then it's all blown up in your face. But for now, you start these guys. And the other star, Pierre Garçon. Leonard who? There was no sign of waiver fodder Mr. Hankerson this time around, who got 2 touchdowns last week. Garçon had 8 catches for 143 yards and a score. He got 20 points himself. Hankerson had 20 last week. Clearly, Garçon is the top weapon in Washington's offense. There is no need for owners to panic. He is a solid number 2 option against the Lions next week, whose secondary is always a little bit shaky. As for the hair pullers, I mentioned him, Leonard Hankerson. Another sad example of the one-week wonder. It's like those one-hit wonders in music. One hit, they have a great song, it's catchy, it's fun, and then they never come back again. And that's what happened to Mr. Hankerson. 3 catches for 35 yards. Unless he develops any sense of consistency with RG3, you want to leave Hankerson on waivers. Santana Moss. Another Redskins receiver that, in my opinion, you just can't trust. He's just way too inconsistent for my taste right now. Garçon is the only reliable weapon. Yeah, had 3 catches for 41 yards. He did have a touchdown, but to me, he's just really not targeted enough. Garçon was the only receiver in the Redskins core, the only one to have double-digit targets. Don't take the risk in Santana Moss. And finally, Eddie Lacy, and really this is only by default because really there weren't any other real bad players in this game. He suffered a concussion. He'll likely miss a few weeks, so leave Eddie Lacy reserved on your bench. James Starks should be one of the number 1, if not higher, waiver pickups this week. Next game. Houston, Tennessee. Boy, not a game I expected to be competitive, but turns out it was. Houston beat Tennessee 30-24 in overtime. And I wasn't expecting it, but luckily Houston pulled it out. Can anyone tell me how Tennessee scored 24 points? I mean, really? Can anyone tell me that? They don't have a number 1 wide receiver. Their only offense is Chris Johnson. How do they score 24 points? I don't know, maybe get a defensive touchdown or something. I don't know. Just makes me wonder. Star for the week, Arian Foster. Foster owners, I have a message for you. And it's very simple. Stop worrying about Ben Tate. Yeah, we know. Okay, Tate's a good running back. And he's a solid number 2 guy going forward. We know that. But as long as Foster is healthy, he is still the guy. And he showed it this week. 19 carries for 79 yards and a touchdown. So please don't freak out about Arian Foster. Now, the Ravens matchup, that's a tough matchup this week going up against Baltimore. So you really might kind of temper expectations a bit. But really, in any league, you just can't afford to sit Arian Foster. So keep riding the pine with him this week. He'll be okay. Again, Chris Johnson. I'll say it again. He's the Titans' offense. He had to, unsurprisingly, he didn't have a touchdown. So again, they had to have some defensive touchdowns or something because he's their offense. There is no number one wide receiver. 25 carries for 96 yards. So he does a lot with the bulk of the work. You just wish he'd find the end zone more often. Going up against the Chargers next week, you can safely start him. Their defense hasn't exactly been stellar this year at all. And the third star goes to DeAndre Hopkins. Yes, the rookie from Clemson. Andre Johnson got a concussion late in the game. He might miss some time, so his status is shaky. Hopkins took full advantage. He had 7 catches for 117 yards and a touchdown. So clearly, the Texans found a very serviceable guy behind Andre Johnson. Now, so obviously, it looks like any time that Johnson's going to play, Hopkins is definitely worth a look as a number 3 going up against the Ravens because I'm telling you, the Texans are going to have to throw a lot in that game to keep up with Baltimore. The hair pullers, Jake Locker, again. 17 of 30 for 148 yards is bad. Now somehow, he threw 2 touchdown passes. Again, I'm not sure to whom, but you're not going to get that every single week from Jake Locker. You're just not, okay? The Titans, I don't know who the Titans' number 1 wide receiver is. I don't know. Do you know? I don't know. All they have are number 2, number 3 wide receivers. They don't have a number 1. They don't have an elite guy that puts up bam numbers every single week. They don't have that. Chris Johnson is mostly their Titans offense, okay? Let's just throw that out there again. Don't pick up Jake Locker, leave him on waivers. Don't play him against the Chargers next week. Moving on. Tennessee's wide receivers, still the number 1 guy. And that's all you need to know. And Owen Daniels, while he did have a touchdown this week for the Texans, he only had that on 2 catches for 24 yards. On 5 targets. He only caught 40% of his targets. You didn't draft Daniels to be your top tight end for weeks like this. But if Johnson misses time and Hopkins is covered a lot, Daniels could take advantage of that. I have him, though, as more of a number 2, though, against that tough Baltimore D next week. Dolphins and Colts. Boy, didn't expect that from Miami, that's for sure. Miami is definitely one of the very intriguing 2-0 teams in the league this year. They are definitely, Ryan Tannehill is finally coming into his own. He is, last year he looked like a rookie and he wasn't talked about among the rookie class because he was just so kind of inconsistent. But he is finally taking control of this offense and making it his own. And oh, by the way, he's got some more toys and weapons to play with around there in Miami. Playing with toys, hello. So, he's definitely taking advantage of that as well. The stars in the game, though, for the Colts, Ahmad Bradshaw. Vic Ballard now is out of the equation for the season, tore his ACL in practice, so Bradshaw finally gets to step into that lead role that we expected him to, and he has this starting job all to himself, and he took advantage of it. 15 carries for 65 yards and a touchdown, along with 19 receiving yards, and all that in the end, it adds up to a really nice day for Bradshaw. Now, I talked about it when the free agency moves happened. I hailed this move in free agency as one of the best free agent moves of the season, and it's going to really pay big dividends, I think. This week, Bradshaw's going up against the 49ers. Well, Marshawn Lynch, if you guys didn't watch, just really carved up that 49ers defense. So Bradshaw really looks really enticing as a number 2 option next week. Maybe the 49ers won't let that happen again, but if that can happen like that, maybe you look at Bradshaw as a number 2 you can plug in there. Speaking of running backs, let's talk about the Dolphins running back. Lamar Miller, he's back. And obviously, though, here's the thing. Colts run D, anyone looks like a start against because the Colts really don't have much of a run D. But it was nice for Miller to get some confidence after that horrible opening week that he had. He had 14 carries for 69 yards and a score, and that's more of a number 2 kind of running back day, but really that's what kind of Miller is right now. He's not elite. He's a guy who can start, certainly, but not one of the top-tier guys yet. Now, he'll eventually separate himself from Daniel Thomas, I think, but for now, You can only treat Miller as is still a startable guy, but more of a number 2 against Atlanta, and that game should be a shootout next week with those high-octane offenses. Third star goes to T.Y. Hilton. Well, so much for that slow start in week 1, T.Y. He finally found his rhythm against the Dolphins. The Dolphins paid a lot of attention to Reggie Wayne, which is why they shut him down, so Hilton took advantage of his opportunities. 6 catches for 124 yards. Now, you wish that Hilton would maybe kind of find the end zone more often. He doesn't do that as often as Wayne does. And the touchdown this week went to Kobe Fleener. But with so many weapons, like I mentioned, with Fleener and other guys, it's not a guarantee every single week that Hilton's going to be getting the bulk of the work. So next week, the Colts taking on the Niners. The Seahawks receivers didn't exactly do really well against them because Lynch did carve them up. I like Hilton maybe as more of a number 3 or flex. Obviously, you're starting Reggie Wayne, even though he had a rough week this week. You can't afford to sit Reggie Wayne. But with T.Y. Hilton, maybe more of a number 3 or flex option for you for that matchup against the 49ers. The guys that let us down, Daniel Thomas, I have to say it. I never bought into this split-time experiment with Daniel Thomas. I'm not sold on him, and the Dolphins shouldn't either. He only had 8 carries for 30 yards. Miller did a lot more with his, So I'm not sold on it. If you want to keep riding the Daniel Thomas train, hoping that he's going to break out, use him as a flex against Atlanta, but that's pretty much all you can use him for. Nothing more than that. He's not worth starting. Don't take the risk on Daniel Thomas. Donald Brown. You're going to be mad at Donald Brown frequently if you're an Ahmad Bradshaw owner, because Donald Brown steals carries from everybody. He is a carry thief. That sounded kind of weird. He shouldn't be owned. All he's going to do is frustrate you. He will literally make you pull out your hair. And Darius Hayward-Bay. Did I not say at some point that he was not better than T.Y. Hilton and should not be the starter over T.Y. Hilton? You know who he's also not better than? Reggie Wayne. You know who he's just as bad as? His old Oakland teammate, Denarius Moore. Yeah, I said it. You can feel free to cut DHB loose after his 2-catch, 10-yard performance. Kansas City and Dallas. Kansas City knocks off Dallas 17-16. Boy, the job that Andy Reid has done with Kansas City. 2-0 start. He's got a great quarterback in Alex Smith. He's got weapons in Jamal Charles and Dwayne Bowe. They are finding ways to win games. And this team is definitely going to be one of the most improved teams in the league this year. And next week, they're going to Philly. Do you know how bad Andy Reid is going to want to win that game? Do you know how bad the Philly fans don't want Andy Reid to win that game? Do you think they'll throw batteries at him? No. I'm kidding. That's a joke. Philly fans is a joke. It's a joke. Snowballs. Oh, wait, there's no snow this time of year. But yeah, let's talk about Kansas City and Dallas, enough about the Philly fans. First star of the game, Alex Smith. 21 of 36 for 223 yards and 2 touchdowns. Clearly, he is performing much better with Andy Reid as his coach in somewhat of a decent offense. Now, while Smith might not put up these numbers every single week, for now, it is certainly something to keep an eye on moving forward. Again, if you're in a league where you start 2 quarterbacks, I don't think he's a surefire start, a number 1 start yet, but if you're in a league where you start 2 quarterbacks, Alex Smith, I think, is definitely serviceable. Number 2 option with upside going up against the Eagles, which I expect to be an offensive slugfest. Dez Bryant. All y'all who were freaking out about Dez's no-show last week. Oh my gosh, he only got 2 points. Oh! Well, breathe now. Breathe. Calm down. Have some dip. Just calm down. Bryant's okay. He had 9 catches for 141 yards and a touchdown. That's what we expect from Dez on a weekly basis. You can safely start him going forward. You can definitely start him against the Rams, who, by the way, just got burned by Julio Jones. So you could definitely start Dez Bryant. And the other star, third star, Dwayne Bowe. It's truly amazing what Bo can do when he has a competent quarterback throwing him the football. You know? And not someone like Matt Castle. Goodbye! 4 catches for 56 yards and a score. This definitely cements his status as Smith's go-to target. And again, like I said, I think this is going to be a shootout game going up against Philly this week. I think Bo is a must-start as a very strong number 2 option for you. The hair pullers in this game, DeMarco Murray. Well, and you can only hope this is a product of that Chiefs' strong defense because Murray, and not Murray himself, because he didn't do much of what he had, only had 6 fantasy points this week. He had 12 carries for 25 yards and 5 catches for 49. So with the Rams coming to town next week, who didn't really do a great job against the Falcons running backs, you can probably go ahead and safely start Murray. You probably can't afford to sit him. A number 2, though, for that matchup against the Rams. Miles Austin. Miles frickin' Austin. That's actually his middle name, at least to me, because that's what I said many times last year when I owned him. And now you're probably saying it too. 3 catches for 31 yards. Boy, doesn't that say it all. Clearly, the number 1 weapon in Dallas is Dez Bryant, and Austin's prime years are behind him. Against the Rams, I would not trust Miles Austin as nothing more than a desperate number 3 or number 4 option for you, if you want to take that risk. And finally, Donnie Avery. Apparently his prime is also long dead and gone, like the Justin Timberlake T.I. song, Hello. I know you guys are getting tired of that joke, but I just love using it. If he couldn't even succeed in Indianapolis with Andrew Luck as his quarterback, it's apparently clear he can't in Kansas City either. 2 catches for 38 yards tells the story, and he should be just left on the waiver wire to stew. Stew. Today, enjoy the Donnie Avery stew on your local menu. Moving on to the Bolts and the Eagles. High-flying offenses in this game, but San Diego, they pulled it out, 33-30. Can I just say it again? I love the Chargers' offense. Who are these Chargers? I said that during the first game against the Texans. I'm watching the Monday night game. Who are these Chargers? I've never seen them be this productive on offense. Phillip Rivers is actually a competent quarterback. Rivers face, shocker. I can't believe that he's actually pulling these things off. Ryan Matthews is good. Danny Woodhead is actually serviceable, and he's got decent receivers to throw to. So, Chargers, man, they're doing pretty well. But the first star, though, has got to go to Michael Vick of the Eagles. If you don't have faith in Michael Vick now in this high-octane Chip Kelly offense, you're nuts. Even in defeat, Vick still was 23 of 36 for 428 yards and 2 scores. And oh, by the way, he also rushed for a touchdown. So Vick plays Kansas City this week. And even though Kansas City's D has been impressive, Vick is going to want to beat Andy Reid. I think you can start Michael Vick with confidence. Speaking of the quarterbacks, second star goes to Phillip Rivers. This team clearly has a new offensive identity. 2 strong performances in the first 2 weeks, and Rivers, he seems to be the cornerstone of that. 36 of 47 for 419 yards with 3 touchdowns, and oh, by the way, all of them to Eddie Royal, equals 35 fantasy points for Phillip Rivers. As long as he can stay upright and not get sacked, Rivers, I hate to say, but he might be on track for a really good season. And you can definitely start him against the Titans, who, oh, by the way, just got ransacked by Houston, who also played really well against San Diego. Hello? And obviously the third star, I mentioned it, Eddie Royal. You cannot deny what Royal has done over the first few weeks of this season. He's become Rivers' favorite target in this offense. We all thought it was going to be Vincent Brown, right? We all thought Vincent Brown was going to be the guy. Nope. We were all wrong. It's Eddie Royal. He scored 5 touchdowns over the first 2 games. 90 yards and all 3 of Rivers' passing touchdowns and win over the Eagles. He should now be owned in all fantasy leagues, and he's definitely worth a look as a number 3 receiver you can play against the Titans this week. The hair pullers, though, even though Ryan Matthews and Danny Woodhead are talented, they're also kind of hair pullers because this is clearly a passing offense in San Diego. Now, even though they are facing the Titans next week, I really don't like Ryan Matthews or Danny Woodhead. You know, Matthews does get the bulk of the carries. He had 16 carries, but only for 73 yards. Woodhead had 9 for 27. Woodhead is more of a PPR option or a flex option. I don't like Matthews nothing more than number 3 potentially because, again, they're going to want to throw in this matchup. Vincent Brown. Just when we all thought he'd become the guy in San Diego with all the injuries, he's now been leapfrogged by Malcolm Floyd and Eddie Royal, and we know that Antonio Gase is already well ahead of everybody. But the positive for Vincent Brown is that Floyd may miss time with a neck injury he suffered, so Brown could finally take advantage of that. We're still concerned, though, after a 4-catch, 26-yard outing. Could be a number 3, number 4 against Tennessee, but again, I like Eddie Royal way more than I do Vincent Brown right now. And finally, any Philadelphia receiver not named Deshaun Jackson. Just when we thought that Jason Avant or Riley Cooper could break out as the number 2. Just stop it. It ain't happening. There is no number 2 Philly receiver. There is only Deshaun Jackson. Arizona beating Detroit, 25-21. To be quite honest, I didn't see this coming. I thought that Detroit would with that offense, walk all over the Cardinals, but apparently Cardinals have some weaponry of their own. They're starting to slowly find some guys who are serviceable in Arizona, and they came through in a big way. So big win for the Cardinals, gives them confidence going forward. But the first star is a Lion. And again, it's Joique Bell. You know, this is another guy who, if he isn't owned already, he will be at 100% owning by this time next week, probably along with Bernard Pierce as well. Reggie Bush's health is really up in the air now. He took a hit on the knee. He already had a thumb injury and a groin injury. The time really could be now for Bell to step into this lead role, and the team might just rest Bush. We obviously want to monitor status, but even if Bush plays, Bell is still getting a lot of the work. He had 72 total yards against the Cards, but he's a playmaker, takes full advantage of his opportunities. Now, if Bush is out, Bell is definitely worth a look as a number 2 guy going up against the Redskins. If Bush plays, he's more of a number 3, but you could definitely plug in Joique Bell as a strong flex option for your fantasy team. I have Joique Bell on my team now. I love this guy. I'm starting him this week against that terrible Redskins defense. Love Joique Bell. Obviously, Calvin Johnson. He had a rough opening week. If you had any concerns with him, you shouldn't have, because he quickly put those to rest. 6 catches for 116 yards and 2 touchdowns. There is no reason to sit Calvin Johnson, especially going up against a terrible Redskins defense. He is going to completely tear them apart like IU did to Bowling Green, like tissue paper. And finally, Rashard Mendenhall. Yes, Rashard Mendenhall. Mendy has clearly established himself as the lead back in Arizona. And as long as he's healthy, he's definitely worth playing for the Cards. 15 carries for 66 yards and a score, along with 28 receiving yards. This definitely makes him a viable play every single week. Now, the Saints defense, it's who the Cards are going up against this week. They've gotten better, but for that matchup, I still like Mendenhall as a number 2 guy you can plug into your lineups. The hair pullers, Reggie Bush. 6 fantasy points, and oh, by the way, he's not healthy. What else is new on the sports page? Obviously, you're going to want to monitor Bush's status all week if you own him. If he plays, you're obviously starting him against that Redskins D. They got destroyed by a guy named James Starks. Carson Palmer. Yes, he is an upgrade in the Arizona offense, but the downside is he still hasn't reached that reliable fantasy level just yet. He was only 22 of 39 for 248 yards, 1 score, and a pick against the Lions. That's more of a number 2 number than a must-start option. So Treat him as such against the Saints. I like some other number 2 guys other than Carson Palmer that I've mentioned here, but he's just a number 2 option right now. And Larry Fitzgerald. Well, apparently we found out that as his quarterback goes, so goes Larry. Shockingly, Fitzgerald wasn't sharking. Now maybe the injury that he suffered has something to do with that, the hamstring issue. But he wasn't the most targeted Cardinals receiver. Only had 2 catches for 33 yards. Now 3 other receivers were targeted more than him, but you want to monitor Fitz's injury here. You can't afford to sit him if he plays, obviously. But he's no longer an elite option against that D because they're still probably going to focus in on Larry Fitzgerald. So monitor Fitz's status. If he doesn't play, you obviously sit him. If he plays, you still start him, but maybe temper expectations a bit. Other guys are going to step up if he doesn't play, like Andre Roberts, like Michael Floyd, like Andre Ellington potentially. So watch these guys on waivers if Fitz is out, or maybe even if you want to take a chance on him now. I wouldn't blame you guys for being all those guys. If I had to rate them, I'd probably say I like Michael Floyd the most of that bunch. I would say maybe he is a number 2, number 3, then maybe Roberts is a 3, and then Ellington is more of a flex play. So that's how I'd rate those guys if Fitzgerald does not play. New Orleans, Tampa Bay. Close game. The Saints are winning ugly. That's kind of a big thing, but they're winning ugly. They are 2-0, but it's not a pretty 2-0. They barely beat Atlanta, barely beat Tampa this week. But again, Tampa's defense really, really good. Even though they're 0-2, that's because mostly they have a bad offense. But their D's better. The star of the game, obviously, was Jimmy Graham. You know, you draft this guy as your number 1 tight end for a reason. He puts up numbers like this. This was a buku week for him. This is the reason why. 10 catches. He was targeted 16 times. That was more than any other Saints receiver. 179 yards and a score. You remember that slump he had last year late in the year? With weeks like this, he won't be slumping anytime soon. Start him as normal against Arizona. Doug Martin. Again, no shocker here, but in this game I'm really reaching at straws because the stars, the studs, are the usual studs we've come to know and love. Martin had 29 carries, 144 yards. You can start him as you normally would against New England. He's mostly the Bucs offense, what little they have. And again, Vincent Jackson, the other Buck you should normally start by default. He's Josh Freeman's only weapon, yada, yada, yada. Solid number 2 start against that rough Patriots secondary. Hair puller? Drew Brees! What, you might say? Well, Drew had a very un-Drew-like day. He was 26 of 46, 322 yards, good, 1 touchdown, and 2 picks, really bad. So on the bell, so if you're looking at the Drew Brees bell curve chart, that would be a C. Sorry. Weekly Noah test. Yeah, we know. It's a test, whatever. So basically had a C day on the bell curve. You expect a bit more from the high-octane Saints offense. So more often than not, though, Drew will be fine. Don't worry about him. The Bucs D's been strong. You can safely start him against the Cards next week. Darren Sproles. Actually, you might as well throw all the Saints running backs in here and make a big, ugly-tasting Saints gumbo. Because Sproles normally best option at the position. But he only had 5 fantasy points with 62 total yards. Again, that might be attributed to the Bucs D, but then again, the Saints running back's usually a mess anyway. He's a decent number 2 option going up against the Cards next week. Again, as I've said, he's the only Saints running back worth starting. And Kenny Stills. Gee, this is the Brandon LaFell syndrome. For all you media who hyped him, not myself included, Kenny Stills just said, screw you. 1 catch for 10 yards. He's not worth adding yet. I don't trust Lance Moore either, who had 1 catch for 15 yards. I have owned Lance Moore in the past, and there was a whole saga where I kept adding him and dropping him, and adding him and dropping him, because he does this. No. Denver rolls the Giants 41-23. Obviously, you expect that from Denver, but Eli had a very un-Eli-like day. The star, though, in the game was Knowshon Moreno. I know, you're going to send all these messages my way saying, you said that a running back was a mess, don't touch it. Well, hear me out now. If you want to own one running back right now in Denver, Knowshon Moreno is your guy, because he's clearly now getting the bulk of the work. 93 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Giants, that simply can't be ignored. He's starting to distance himself from Moneyball, yuck, and Ronnie Hillman, double yuck, double vomit. You could definitely plug Moreno as a number 2 against the Raiders if you're desperate. Eric Decker, for those of you who were worried about Decker's disappearing act last week, he came back this time around. He caught 9 balls for 87 yards. Now, Wes Welker still did beat him in fantasy points, but he did outperform Demaryius Thomas. And really, you can't really afford to say any Broncos wide receiver on a weekly basis. Yeah, one might get the short straw, but you never know who. You can definitely start Decker and Demaryius and Welker against the Raiders. As we know, they are awful. Not as bad as Jacksonville, but they are awful. And Brandon Myers, the Giants' tight end. Yes, even though Eli had a rough night, his receivers still came through in big ways. You're obviously starting Victor Cruz and Hakeem Nicks. Obviously, those guys are good. But how about some praise for Brandon Myers, who had 6 catches for 74 yards? If you're in a pinch at tight end and somehow Myers is available on the wire, could be worth a sneaky start against the Panthers next week if you're in a pinch at tight end. So keep an eye on him. As for the guys who made us pull out our hair, Eli Manning. Yikes. After I gave him so much praise for his performance last week, Eli remembered that he was, I'm the lesser Manning brother, even though I have more Super Bowl rings, and he threw 4 interceptions against Denver. That took away from his really good stat line, 28 of 49 for 362 yards and a touchdown. Now, Eli should bounce back next week against Carolina, who, by the way, just got carved up by E.J. Manuel. I still think Eli is a nice low number 1, high number 2 option for you based on this matchup. The Giants running backs. Gee, where have I said this before? When Darrell Scott has the most fantasy points of your running backs, that's a really bad thing. And the team just re-signed Brandon Jacobs. And David Wilson, he treats a football like buttered popcorn at a movie. This situation is a mess. You can't trust him. Last week, when David Wilson had those 2 fumbles in a CBS league, guess how many points he had? -3. I wouldn't start any Giants back against Carolina. Even though they just got carved up by Buffalo's backs, I wouldn't touch it. Remember, this is the same Carolina D that also shut down Beast Mode Marshawn Lynch. And finally, I hate to say it. I really hate to say it. But Moneyball. Moneyball High. Hi, Chris here. Hi, Money. Remind me why I drafted you to be my number 2 running back again. He has done nothing to prove it. You got beat by an older Knowshon Moreno and a guy named Ronnie Hillman, who now has also done nothing like you. If you really think at some point, if you're an owner who thinks at some point that Moneyball is going to break out, fine, by all means, hold on to him. I'm not taking that chance. The Raiders beat the really bad Jaguars 19-9. The Jaguars are so bad that fans are rallying for Tim Tebow. Yes, your team must be that bad when you are holding rallies for Tim Tebow. And it's really not a rally when only 20 people show up and 30 media members show up. When your media outnumbers your rally fans, it's really not a rally now, is it? So if a rally happens and no one sees it, is it really a rally? No! Then again, I guess having Tebow in Jacksonville wouldn't be too big of a stretch. I mean, how much worse can the Jaguars offense get? Remember, this is a Jaguars offense that has only scored 11 points in 2 games. Jaguars offense, you can't find it. Don't even try going to the Bermuda Triangle. It's not there either. The first star question mark goes to Chad Henne. You know, I kind of have to give Henne his dap because he's actually a better quarterback than Blaine Godawful Gabbert. Yes, Blaine Godawful Gabbert. Again, that's kind of a middle name that I've given him because he is that bad. I mean, let's not get too crazy. It's still bad. Chad Henne's still bad. But 25 of 38 for 241 yards and a touchdown for 15 fantasy points, not that bad of a day. You know, it's number 2, number 3 quarterback numbers. However, you still don't really want to start him next week because that Seahawks defense just shut down Colin Kaepernick and the 49ers. And oh, by the way, it's at Seattle, where they just set a record for the loudest crowd ever. Second star goes to Darren McFadden. Told you to start him against the Jaguars D. He paid dividends for you. Even though he didn't find the end zone, which is kind of shocking. But still, 19 carries for 129 yards is nothing to be ashamed about. And the continuing good news, breaking news here, Darren McFadden is still healthy. Yay! We're happy about that if we own Darren McFadden. And as long as this is the case, safely start him against the Broncos next week. And the third star, by default, goes to Cecil Shorts. Salute your Shorts, hello! You know, it's clear that Shorts prefers Chad Henne to Blaine Godawful Gabbert. 8 catches for 93 yards later. Like I've said, someone's got to catch the ball in Jacksonville. And Shorts really now is the only Jaguar we're starting, with MJD potentially missing time this week, but monitor that situation. But again, remember, the Jags are playing Seattle at the world's loudest stadium. I would only consider Shorts a number 3 or flex option for that game. Here, pull number 1, Terrell Pryor. So much for your number 1 waiver claim, am I right? Pryor failed to take advantage of a butter-soft Jaguars defense. He only went 15 of 24 for 126 yards and 9 carries for 50. This is the same guy that carved up the Colts last week, and he couldn't do it against Jacksonville? Oy vey. This has to be a bit of a concern going forward. And going up against that Broncos team is really no sure thing. I like more guys with number 2 upside than Pryor this week. I think he's more of a number 2, number 3 for that game. Here, puller number 2, Marcel Reese. Marcel Reese, let us remind you of the fantasy law. How dare you vulture a touchdown from Darren McFadden? You know the rule. You only have fantasy value when Darren McFadden is injured. He's not injured yet. Stop breaking the law, butthole! You don't get that reference? I believe that's from a Jim Carrey movie called Me, Myself, and Irene. And finally, the third hair puller, Maurice Jones-Drew. Normally Mr. Reliable for the inept Jaguars offense, MJD had 10 carries for a meager 27 yards, and then he went down with an ankle injury. Actually, we've later found out it's a tendon issue in his foot. Now, obviously, you want to monitor his status the rest of the week, but even if MJD plays, remember, I wouldn't recommend starting him because he's going up against that lethal Seahawks defense in Seattle, the world's loudest stadium. I think Seattle could have been Oregon and win this game 59-0. Remember last year when Seattle beat Arizona 50-something to nothing? Yeah, that could be this week. That could be Seattle against Jacksonville. That could be 50-something to nothing. Just saying. Speaking of the Seahawks and the high-flying team, as you saw on Sunday Night Football, they railroaded the 49ers 29-3. Yes, 29-3. And once again, oh, by the way, the crowd there at CenturyLink Field changing the name every single time. It's hard to keep up with. Set a record for the loudest decibel level, reaching 135 decibels. Yikes. You really want to play in that? Good luck. The first star, obviously, is Beast Mode, Marshawn Lynch. He finally showed why he is given that name after practically disappearing against Carolina with only 4 fantasy points. I wasn't worried about him. You shouldn't have been either. I told you guys not to worry. He bounced back. He hit it a big way. He put up 135 total yards and 3 touchdowns. And let's see. Gee, again, let me look again here. Let's see. Who do the Seahawks play next week? the Jaguars. Oh my gosh. Lynch is a must start. He's the start of the week. Are you kidding? That soft butter defense is going to be destroyed by the beast. If you can interpret that, it means start Marshawn Lynch next week. The second star, let's see. Actually, I got nothing else for this one, honestly. This was an ugly game that was dominated by Seattle and beast mode, and beast mode pretty much was the only star. Russell Wilson didn't have a great day. The receivers were invisible. So let's go straight to the bat. Hello. Hair puller number 1, Colin Kaepernick. And let's be perfectly honest here. If you were expecting Kaepernick to have to shred the Seahawks defense in Seattle like he did against the Packers, you were kidding yourself. 13 of 28 for 127 yards passing and 87 on the ground, but 3 interceptions. Add it all up, and what do you got? Crippity, croppity, crap, 5 fantasy points. However, stick with Kaepernick because he will run all over that Colts run D next week. It's okay. You can once again safely start Colin Kaepernick. Hair pull number 2, Frank Gore. But again, this was expected. Seahawks defense in Seattle. I shouldn't need to say any more. And thankfully, since Frank Gore is not playing Seattle every single week, you can safely start him against the Colts. You can pretty much lump Vernon Davis and every Niners receiver in this hair puller category too, because again, the matchup. Now, Davis is a big question mark this week because he strained his hamstring. So you definitely want to monitor him, but he has actually said on his Twitter, no worry about the leg, guys. I'm playing this week. I just need some rest. So hopefully that is true, and they won't have to go on the waiver wire for a tight end. Now, the only wide receiver we're starting is Anquan Bolden. And finally, hair puller number 3, Doug Baldwin. 1 catch for 51 yards. Don't kid yourself on this guy breaking out either. Just because Golden Tate had a bad week and Sidney Rice is mostly invisible, don't be that guy who puts in a claim for Doug Baldwin. He's more missed than hit and shouldn't be owned. Finally, the Monday night game, which really was more of a Monday night romp because Pittsburgh is so bad and Cincinnati is actually decent. The Bengals beat the Steelers 20-10. Yes, the Pittsburgh Steelers are 0-2 for the first time in, wait for it, 11 years. When your number 1 receiver is freaking out that he's not getting enough targets, and when your star running back is out and the running game is non-existent, and when Ben Roethlisberger isn't an elite quarterback, that's a problem. The number 1 star goes to Andy Dalton, the former Horned Frog. Horned Frogs! The numbers aren't exactly pretty, but as long as Dalton finds ways to win and puts up decent number 2 numbers, he actually is a serviceable backup for your team. 25 of 45 for 280 yards and a score isn't dazzling, but Andy Dalton isn't dazzling. He's Andy Dalton. That sounds like a number 2 quarterback guy to me. Now, he's a decent quarterback in an evolving offense with really one real weapon right now. Against the Packers next week, he remains a number 2 guy because that, again, is probably going to be an offensive shootout. Second star goes to the Bengals tight ends. Now, apparently, I thought only one of these guys would be the breakout guy, but Jermaine Gresham and Tyler Eifert can catch plenty of passes and put up yardage. That's what both did against the Steelers. Both of them racked up 66 yards, although Gresham did it on more targets. They both put up a lot of yardage. If either of these guys are available in your league and you need help at tight end, pick them up. They're definitely sneaky sleeper options going forward. Now, I like Gresham a bit more because Eifert's more used as a blocking tight end. He gets more targets as a result. I like Gresham as the number 2 and Eifert as the number 3 with upside. And the third star goes to the Bengals running backs. Let's face it, the Bengals dominated the Steelers in every aspect. The law firm, or BJGE, full name Ben Jarvis Green Ellis, had 22 carries for 75 yards, while Giovanni Bernard definitely broke out. 65 yards and 2 touchdowns, including a receiving one where he was high-stepping into the end zone and got some love from the Bengals mascot, Houday. With the Packers' D not exactly a juggernaut, you can expect big things from both these guys next week, I think. Green Ellis is a number 2 option. Bernard is a number 2, number 3, definitely with upside, and a definite flex candidate for you. Meanwhile, the guys that didn't do so good, I guess I'm going to pick on the Steelers here. Hair puller number 1, Ben Roethlisberger. Actually, I give up. Let's put all Steelers in this category of hair pullers because let's put Big Ben and the Steelers running backs all in this category. The only bright spots may be Emmanuel Sanders and Antonio Brown, who might be worth starting as number 3 guys, but really, that's it. The rest of this offense, a downright mess. And guess who Pittsburgh has to face next week? The Bears defense. Da Bears. I would not count on any Steelers until Le'Veon Bell returns. Seriously. And final, hair pull number 2, A.J. Green. But don't panic on A.J. Green. He was targeted 14 times. He only had 6 catches for 41 yards, but he is still Andy Dalton's number 1 guy. It's kind of like that Des Bryant thing. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about A.J. Green. You really can't afford to sit him anyway. Start him as you normally would. And the final hair puller of the Fantasy Football Stock Report this week is Mohamed Sanu. By default, really. Some people thought he'd actually be a number 3 wide receiver. I don't recall being one of them. You shouldn't either. Leave him on waivers, and if you believed in him, please drop him. All right, that is it. That is it for Week 2. It's in the books. We're done with Week 2. Moving on to Week 3. Again, good luck with your games this week. Hope you get all the guys you want off waivers. I did. I hope you can enjoy the videos every week. Again, thank you to all my subscribers. Thank you to all the guys who post comments, questions, view the video. Thank you so much. Spread the word out there. And again, if you guys have any questions or comments, please feel free before the game start on Sunday or Thursday. Please feel free to leave them either on the video or on the channel. Again, I will try to get to as many as I can. I get alerts saying that you guys post comments and questions, so I will definitely look into those. So thank you guys again so much for your support. God bless, and good luck in your Fantasy Weeks next week. And we'll see you again next time on the next edition of the Fantasy Football Stock Report. Goodbye!